To a complete beginner, why would they want to use Astralane or JITO compared to Helius?
Whenever a user is using your particular application, they want that response, like that high-speed response. So we provide the infrastructure stack which is really optimized for speed. Other benefits that you have, which is like the fill quality. When you're placing a trade, you want to make sure that you get it at the best possible price for yourself.
Hi everyone and welcome to a new pod. Today we have Sujith. Sujith is the co-founder of Astralane. Astralane is a company that's building high-speed transaction infrastructure for Solana. He's also done crypto startups before this. In this video, we'll understand his journey. How did he get into crypto? What were the startups that he did before this? And how did they land eventually on Astralane? What does Astralane do? And what is the tech that goes behind building a company like this? With that, Sujith, welcome to the pod. Would love to know more about your background from the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Kirat. Just to give a quick introduction, my name is Sujith, one of the founders at Astralane. At its core, at Astralane, what we do is we build networking solutions for a lot of high performance operators, particularly dealing with distributed systems. It's kind of like a unsexy version of what we do. But we deal with, like, let's say if a certain client wants to place high frequency trading orders in a club on the Solana chain, or even if they're in like a region like Frankfurt itself and they want to like blast through orders into the same server in Frankfurt, then we help provide networking and software products for those kind of situations. We currently work with some of the biggest applications in Solana, some of the biggest market making firms, prop trading firms, currently doing about 2 to 3 million trades per day through our middleware. Still a long way to go. We're scaling day on day. We provide like a couple of products for most of these traders, and yeah, that's like a quick intro.
Beautiful. One question we love to ask the audience is, what was your Eureka moment? What made you get into crypto? Was your first gig / job directly into crypto, or were you in standard Web2 development before this?
So my first entry into crypto was back in university when we were sort of like going around hackathons and figuring out what are some like interesting problems that could be solved with technology. We particularly had like these sort of issues around like the vehicle marketplaces in Dubai, where there was a lot of like misinformation, because when you're importing and exporting cars, you sort of like scrub the data. So we saw like a big use case for blockchain networks then, where you could put that data on a network from the vendor side, and then when a buyer in another country buys that vehicle, he has access to that data. This was back in 2016 when smart contracts were not even like a proper thing, and no one was really building anything complicated on smart contracts. So one of the first couple of projects that we started, or like my team started working on, was like an Algo stable which was collateral backed on a centralized server. So you would deposit fiat into a bank account, and then that is like Algo stabilized on chain using ERC20 contracts. That picked up quite well, but then it had a lot of like other nuanced issues when it comes to like KYC, getting user adoption, etc. But we still stuck to the industry. We were constantly trying to figure out problems which could be solved within the Web3 space, and we found a niche within the insurance sector. So back in like 2018, 2019, once smart contracts started becoming a thing, there was this huge foray of like people trying to fork different protocols or like build different smart contract logic. But then there was a lot of volume flowing through those contracts, and they were getting exploited left, right, and center. So we found this niche market where we could pull in resources or capital from people who wanted to provide security coverage to different smart contracts, where they had like certain trust in the auditors, certain trust in the way the tokenomics works, the protocol worked, and then we would use that to provide cover to normal users. So let's say if a big VC firm or a big fund wanted to deploy capital into that vault, then we would provide an insurance cover for that. This was sort of like our first big protocol. At one point, we were one of the top 3 biggest insurance protocols on Ethereum. It was called as Noray, and this was also our foray into the space of MEV infrastructure as well. So this is actually a cool project that we had going back in Noray. So what we used to do was, whichever protocol had like an insurance cover with us, we would have like a small circuit breaker implemented in their smart contract, which would be whitelisted. So if there is like, let's say, a big transaction in the mempool, in the public mempool, which is draining out those smart contracts, we would simulate it and see that drain is happening, and then replay that transaction with a way higher bribe fees on the mainnet, right? Now theoretically, this concept was supposed to work. We had done a bunch of tests, rolled it out in production into mainnet, and we did have some cases in like smaller protocols where we were able to save some of the capital. But what we truly understood through this exercise was that the space of MEV infrastructure was quite complex. We were routing orders that were supposed to be privately routed, like we were using these private RPCs, only to find out that there were people even seeing those transactions and overbidding us by copying our transaction. So we were trying to protect something, and then they were trying to overbid that and then cause the exploit again. So we started building some of the current stack under Astralane back in 2022, when we were experimenting with MEV infrastructure. And then in 2023, we had a chance, we got a good acquisition offer for our insurance protocol, and the team was a lot more focused on the MEV infrastructure side. And that's how we sort of like started working on Astralane. Always been in crypto, doing DeFi things, and we are primarily of like a software engineering background. We like to solve like very hardcore, deep software issues. At Astralane, we mostly solve this from a networking point of view. We know that there are a lot of like market structure issues right now on Solana as well, but what we want to focus on is that if someone wants to go from like point A to point B, irrespective of what the scheduling logic is or the type of traffic, we want to make sure that pathway is like as quick as possible. And right now, there is one project already which is doing something similar, which is 00, which does multicast, but it's primarily designed for validators. What we do is like we focus more on the use case side, which is from an infrastructure point of view. So for things like transaction delivery, optimizing on your read speed, or if you want to work with certain applications on like taker prioritization or backruns for like order flow arrangements, then you could facilitate that through our infrastructure.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. To a complete beginner, how would they understand if they want to land a transaction? Let's say, why would they want to use Astralane or JITO compared to something like a Helius as the RPC provider? What is the big difference between these?
Okay, so if you look at the main differences, first is you have the speed. Whenever a user is using your particular application, if you're building an application and some user is using it, they want that response, like that high speed response from the application whenever a trade is like submitted, right? And this can only be facilitated if the underlying infrastructure is like optimized enough. We have engineers which come from like a very networking heavy background. Some of them have even worked on very high speed game server environments as well, where like you can see this in like probably the communities that run Minecraft servers. You will see users complaining about like ping speed or like latency of like players to the server and things like that. So we provide like a infrastructure stack which is really optimized for speed. And then, as a consequence of the speed, are certain other benefits that you have, which is like the fill quality. When you're placing a trade, you want to make sure that you get it at the best possible price for yourself, no matter who you are, right? If you're a meme coin trader, you would probably want the top of the block space, right? You would want your trade to land in the top of the block space, because whenever the charts are moving on a trading terminal, it updates on the bottom of block price. So you don't want to place the trade at the end of the next block where the price could be significantly different. Same applies to like market makers. They're capturing like probably very small spreads, which could be like 3 to 4 bips, which might be their entire profits. And these prices change throughout the block, right? I mean, obviously, there are certain nuances on our side where this affects as well, but we sort of like help optimize them. And also, if you look at the current landscape of like RPC providers and block builders as well, it's a bit complex. Like you will see trading teams complain about spending like 70 to 80% of their time figuring out how to focus their execution stock. Like they're constantly keeping in update with the different scheduling policies, different client types. How do they submit orders on those particular scheduler types? Your type of order changes in each one of them, right? So what we do as an infrastructure provider is sort of like balance those out. We give recommendations to our client based on their trading setup, that okay, this is what you pay. We will optimize on the execution cost for you. You tip us this particular amount, and then let's say if we are able to capture back or save some cost for you, you get that back as like rebates, right? This is like very niche product that you do. Then when you want to read data at a very high speed, in TradFi the same problem happens. A lot of the high speed access for high frequency traders are gated by licensed data brokers, right? If you want to access like the high speed pathways to NASDAQ, for example, you have to go through licensed brokers or very expensive services like Data Bento, for example, right? Which brings the it brings towards this like inability for like smaller trading teams to capture or get into the market. So what we want to do is like provide infrastructure which is like very cost efficient, so that if there is a certain trading team which wants to capture a certain market opportunity, then they have access to products where they can do that, but they don't have to lock in for like huge licensing agreements with like validators or infra providers at like a very high cost point. And yeah, sometimes another big use case is that sometimes some of the bigger, I don't want to name any names, but like some of the bigger, let's say infrastructure providers have certain restrictions, which are because of how the foundation's policy works, that prevents a lot of like experimentation factors. There might be certain newer protocols which might want to experiment with different designs. If you're working on like, let's say, a aggregator and you want to work with a certain market making team where you want to propagate data privately over TEs, right? How do you facilitate that kind of infrastructure? And how do you do it in a way that you don't have to maintain like a 6-person DevOps team to like maintain that stack, right? So these sort of like order flow arrangements are now becoming more and more popular on Solana as well. So that's also a market that we focus on.
Got it. You mentioned other providers. On that, I would like to ask, how do you differentiate from JITO specifically? Is it on the price? Is it on the execution quality? Is it on the protection?
So compared to JITO, there is a lot of optimization that we do when it comes to like transaction landing quality. When you're a trader, when you want to submit transactions, if you're sending to JITO, for example, you normally send it to the JITO block engine. What we do is like we provide optimized pathways to directly the leader itself. So sometimes you could send transactions just with a priority fee and then land your transaction. That is one big use case. We also so another very good product of JITO, which They sort of like invented into the space is that the shred streaming product, they were the original inventors of the shred streaming product. It's a way where you could get quick feedback on what execution that you did on chain directly from the leaders. We also have like a complementary service similar to this, where we work together with validators to propagate this data directly to this. So I would say we're not really like a full-blown competitor to JITO. We have definitely complementary lines of businesses as well. We also work very closely with the JITO team, give them feedback, and because of that connection, they also help us route some of our traffics through their block engines as well. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to focus on the users, which is the applications, the traders. We want to build better products for them, which might not be always like possible for a block builder to do.
Got it. Makes sense. I would love to go behind the scenes. What are your engineers doing on a day-to-day basis? I would assume number one, you're working with validators on one side. Maybe you're leasing lines, through different providers, and you're just aggregating all of this for your end users. What other than the operational challenges with talking to validators and lease line providers, what software are your engineers building on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. So the core software engineering is split into, let's say, on one side you have the client core development team, which is like constantly looking into what's happening in the latest agave patches and the latest fired answer patches, and the other scheduler mods that are running out there with like unique scheduling logics, how they're doing it, what is the best way to integrate into it. So that's like one portion of the site where there is quite a lot of like in-house data talent we have built up on like Rust and C++ side. Then you have the networking team, where a lot more of the focus is on how do you route packets in the best optimal way possible, how do you do congestion control, how do you do different forms of like broadcast. Like something that we have been recently trying out is like a multi-hop broadcast system. It's a bit different from multicast, where you're not using that many pathways and you don't need like custom hardware. So working with different networking concepts there, optimizing the stack, studying like jitter on different lines, for example, and then tracking that. It's more like a lot of like data analysis goes into this particular division, and then little less of like engineering effort. Then you have the DevOps team, which is more so like managing all the servers, optimizing the hardware, doing like CPU fine-tunings, hardware fine-tunings at a network level as well, provisioning fibers, making sure that these fibers are healthy. Again, as you mentioned, like a lot of effort goes into like sometimes finding the right way to optimize traffic. Like let's say if we see a lot of demand coming from LA, for example, this was back in like June, July last year, we were seeing a lot of traffic come from LA. So we were setting up, figuring out the best data centers in LA, then figuring out fibers which would go from like Tokyo or Frankfurt to LA. And the problem is like sometimes you don't get the direct fibers, so you have to find like pops in between, set up servers there, and then connect those fibers and then route it from there through multi-hop broadcast. So setting all of those up, that functions between like the networking team and the DevOps team. And then we also have like even our business development team is like very engineering heavy. What they do is like they look at like the client side optimization side as well. If there is a new application or a trading team, and they're saying that okay, we are not able to get their orders through, or they're saying like some orders fail, then debugging that and figuring out where the latency is being caused It might even be something at like a very hardware level, where the DC that they're working with has like a firewall in place, which is like affecting the quick connections to us, right? So on the business development side itself, we have like a lot of engineers, for example, right? Yeah, that's mostly on the core side.
Got it. When you guys hire, what kind of questions do you generally ask? What does the interview process look like?
I would say the most important thing that we care about is like problem solving. Um, in general, almost any skill can be acquired. Being in a space where, let's say, a lot of the information is like sometimes proprietary, and it's hard to come by, and some of the people that work within the industry are always on like very high paid packages and salaries, and us being like a smaller scale startup, we don't prefer to hire those kind of individuals. So we try to look at like smaller individual problem solvers who have like their own unique way of thinking about problems. It doesn't matter what background you're in, you could be an electrical engineer or a robotics engineer for all we care, but if you have solved problems with like a very statistical approach, and you were able to work with different systems where you lacked an understanding of it, like from a very in-depth point of view, but still were able to solve problems, then that is something that we look out for in the candidates. So the first interview call is just basically getting to know about the person, what sort of problems they've solved, and then we sort of like, if that makes sense, if the person has that quality, then we look at the technical side. Okay, like, you know, basic Rust programming, C++ programming, basic Python, for example. Data analysis is a core function across the org. We are an infrastructure company. We have like a lot of data processing through us, so understanding and analyzing that is like a basic core skill, so that gets looked at in the second stage.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any technical problem that you've not solved yet, or are you struggling with yet, that you'd like to hire for, or generally, what is that one hard technical problem that you're yet to solve?
Okay, so right now what we are seeing is that a lot of problems are becoming opinionated within especially within Solana, and also like the wider trading space. If you look at like the perpetuals trading landscape, there's a lot of like debates going around, like how much speed bumps to give, whether to even have a speed bump, what is considered toxic versus non-toxic. And then if you look at like the other markets, like the applications themselves, they want certain kind of like regime changes where the execution cost for their users is like very low, so that they have like a competitive advantage. And then sometimes they want to monetize on like order flow. So there are like these problems which are being created. I would probably classify them into a couple of different verticals. So one of them is like certain sort of like order flow products, where people, like, there are application venues which want to work with trading teams, but then they want to make sure that the trading team doesn't do anything malicious with that order flow data. And currently there is no privacy enabled way to do that, where, let's say, if a trading team commits to running a certain set of code, that code is not being maliciously changed to like profit more under certain behavior. On the Ethereum side, there's a lot more research work that is being done, which is also foundation-led to solve some of these problems. Using T's, the JITO guys are doing a fabulous job at this, but from what I understand, it's not fully reached to a point where you can run like application-specific logic on the T's yet. But that is one area where we're seeing a lot of potential problem solving that could be done. Another problem solving place is the perpetuals. We haven't seen a lot of like native high volume perpetual exchanges on Solana. It could be due to various set of like market structure issues. There is currently an ongoing debate that allowing maker prioritization on chain is going to allow for better execution quality for the users, which is going to bring a lot more volume to the perp exchanges on Solana. But this is like it's a debated topic. No one has tried and tested this out. But it's
Right.
going to be like execution in environment dependent. I think there is room to grow in this space. I know the guys at Archer Exchange are solving some of these problems as well using their own auction model. So that's interesting to see. Another big problem space which doesn't exist at the moment but could be interesting is around multiple concurrent proposers. Especially with Alpenglow getting shipped, MCP is not so far away, but once multiple concurrent proposals come into play, there is a lot of things that have to be built up around that. One of the main problems that is going to happen is like fork choice inclusionless. So let's say if there are different proposers who are creating different forks, like what are the rules around selecting the right fork? This is like a business problem to solve, not just like a software problem to solve, which then creates opportunities for teams to come together and figure out interesting ways to solve this for applications, validators, trading teams, etc. There's also like other problems like block future auctions. Like for example, if let's say you're seeing a certain time period within the next couple of like trading window where you might see like a big congestion happening due to like let's say a market news or like the US market open time, the pricing in priority execution environment for that particular set of markets is going to be different from the rest of the markets, and this pricing basis could be provided to a lot of market makers to understand how they can bid competitively. Currently, a lot of these bigger market makers, they're trying to build all of these pricing mechanisms in-house, but then they keep changing, right? So there could be infrastructure providers or like niche services within the pricing space where the pricing data is like packaged into a product and then provided as a streamable solution, which is plug and play for the market makers. Some of these problems we are solving as well, but we are always open to collaborate with other teams which are solving similar problems as well.
Got it. Thank you. That was a pretty dense answer. And on that note, how can people reach out to you if they want to collaborate, work with you, join as an engineer?
Perfect. The best way to reach out to us is our Discord server. I'm almost always active, probably like 16 to 18 hours a day on our Discord server. So that's probably the best way to reach out. Just drop by the server, say hi, or create a ticket. Another good way is probably my Twitter DMs as well. If you guys have any questions, technical, non-technical, general advice, always happy to help support builders in India.
All right. With that, thank you so much, Sujith. The beautiful pod. And we'll see you guys in the next one.